welcome to the Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer. I'm the owner of Maxwell's fitness programs, and I've been in business since 1994. The purpose of this podcast is to get to the real deal of what really works, and most importantly, why it works. Hence the name, The Method to the Madness, which if you've trained with me for any amount of time, you know that I say often, because so many people just think that things happen randomly in the fitness world. In other words, they think, oh, if I just do this, this might happen. And I often say, there really is a method to the madness. In other words, those that have studied the science know why things work, and it is so much more simple than people might realize, or I should say that people are led to believe by the old marketers out there. So that's my little spiel on that in the introduction. Today we're going to have some fun talking about a topic that, I would say it's on almost everybody's mind. And I'm just going to tease you with that, so you're going to have to pay attention while I thank Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They currently have over 280 5-star reviews on Zillow. The Gilden Group and Realty Pros is number one in Volusia County. That's pretty good. As I say, success begets success. So when you're good at something, it shines through. They can be reached at 386-451-2412. All right, so what is that thing that's on everybody's mind almost always? When I ask people, what is your ultimate goal? What do you think most people say? They say in some way, shape, or form that they want to lose body fat and they want to gain muscle. Very few people say that. There are situations, what we call special populations, where we're working on very specific things, like somebody might have had a hip replacement and, we see quite a bit of skeletal rehabilitation in the gym because it's necessary. If people don't properly strength train after rehabilitation, they're going to have issues. So we see that. And so they're not going to necessarily say they need to add muscle and lose body fat. Although, you know what? They probably don't mind either. It just seems to be on everybody's mind. And when we think of health and fitness, that is often what we think about. I'm not sure if that's what was thought about, say, 50 years ago. I think, aesthetics, I don't want to say vanity so much wrong with this goal. And I'm not insinuating that there's actually anything wrong with vanity, but it just, I believe, was different. Maybe it was, I don't know if I could run a certain amount or a certain length, or if you can carry on your day and not get tired. I think oftentimes it was more about how you feel, how you could perform. That was kind of the essence of physical fitness 50 years ago or so, maybe not even that long ago. But I look back at some of the old footage of when Kennedy was president, and just prior to him when Eisenhower was president, and they started rocking and rolling with the Presidential Council of Physical Fitness. And you see these videos, these old, old-fashioned videos of what kids were actually doing in gym class and stuff back then, and it's pretty crazy. And, the need for body composition wasn't quite there either. When we go back 50 years, only around 10% of the population was obese. It is up to 60 to 70% when you combine obesity and being overweight now. So times have really changed. So maybe that's why it wasn't the focus so much, because that just was not an issue. It was most people were in relatively good condition, and then there were some people that were out of shape. Well, jump forward 50 years and most people are out of shape and only a few people are in what we would call good condition. So the norm isn't very good. And by the way, I'm not insinuating that anybody who wants to increase their muscle mass and decrease their fat mass has a bad goal, or that you're out of shape if you want to do that, because oftentimes it's people that are already in very good condition that feel that way. I think a lot of people want to keep muscle mass on their body, and I agree with that 100%. We should always be thinking about keeping muscle mass on our body, because as we age, that's one of the most important metrics, bar none. All right. So I get that out of the way, and I guess I want to add a little caveat to that. So, because I don't want people to feel like, well, I'm in pretty good shape, but I still want to remain leaner and keep muscle. No, again, that's great. I mean, ultimately, that is a physique athlete's goal, a bodybuilder, or a women's physique competition, or now they have men's physique, which is slightly different than bodybuilding. I mean, that's their goal too. They want to add as much muscle as possible and decrease their fat mass. So again, that's fine. What I want to talk about today, and this might be a little bit of an extended podcast because there's a lot to it, is the science behind it. Because there is, my friends, a method to the madness on this. And so many people don't have it. And they will throw one part of it out and not do it, maybe out of fear or lack of knowledge. In the case with me training people, though, sometimes it's fear, because I give them the knowledge of what they need to do, but they don't really want to execute it, because it's hard for them to wrap their brain around what they have to do. And the bottom line is, when we want to reach this goal, just like every other goal, you have to give something up. I mean, you just do. You can't go all in on a pretty centralized goal and not give something up. All right. So I'm going to explain that. So first off, if you just wanted to gain muscle mass and you didn't care so much about the fat mass, and when we think of that, we think of, say, bodybuilders 20 or 30 years ago would go all in an off season and pack on as much muscle as possible. And they didn't care if they gained fat too. So they would just gain weight. I mean, some of these guys would gain upwards of 70 pounds. 70, not 7, 70 pounds. They would just really get huge. The belief back then was that just get as big as you can, that you really can't decrease fat mass as you are increasing muscle mass. And there is some truth to that, by the way, and I'm going to spend most of the time on that, but not complete truth. But to the level of the body mass that they wanted to gain, in other words, pack on as much muscle as possible, there was some truth to it. Like, they didn't want to gain 25% increase. Like, they wanted to get as big as they can, and they would. And then they would do that again over 6 to 8 months, and then maybe take 4 months or so, maybe longer, depending on how fat they got, because some of them did get pretty darn fat. They got huge, but they got fat. And then if they were competing, which they were, I mean, why would they have done that if they weren't? I mean, I did know some amateurs that never competed that kind of lived that lifestyle, and I used to think, why are you putting yourself out of shape for 4 to 6 months out of the year? Why don't you just stay pretty muscular and leaner versus hugely muscular and fat? But, whatever floats your boat. Sometimes people equate that to, more power, more strength. Maybe it's like driving around in a huge pickup truck. I have to say LOL on this one, because I got some friends that are going to now want to beat me up. But anyway, I don't know why, but that's what they would do. But that's not the healthiest way to do it. But that's easy, or I should say easier. It is never easy to gain muscle. It's not. That is an adaptation that occurs. So what happens is, when we strength train, or when we do hard work, right? Because we can gain muscle doing hard labor, like literally chopping wood or, carrying hay. I had a young client who's coming to me for swimming to keep her body strong for swimming, and she's young, she's high school. So how'd you get them scratches on your legs? I was, baling hay. I'm like, Wow. Okay. So people still do that. So stuff like that's work. But traditionally or typically now, when we think of hard work, gaining muscle, it's in the gym, it's lifting weights, it's using the selectorized machines, it's using dumbbells, it's that kind of stuff. So what happens is the primary way that we get stronger and bigger is through hypertrophy. 95% of our muscle growth occurs through hypertrophy. 5% occurs through hyperplasia sometimes. Sometimes. It's a very, very, very hot topic and not fully understand. And what hyperplasia actually is the muscle cells actually multiply. They actually multiply. Now, for the longest time, we didn't believe that hyperplasia occurred at all with muscle cells. We just thought that hypertrophy only. Well, now they're saying that maybe in 5% of the cases, when somebody has reached full hypertrophy on all their muscle cells, that hyperplasia can occur where the muscle cells literally multiply. All right. But we do know that 95% or more of muscle growth is through hypertrophy. And what that is the individual muscle fiber splits and gets bigger. So it doesn't multiply, it splits itself and gets bigger. All right. So that individual muscle cell gets bigger, and all muscle cells are housed in what is called a motor unit. So when all these muscle cells get bigger themselves, the motor unit gets bigger. And then the motor units get bigger, the muscle gets bigger, the muscle belly gets bigger. And that's how that occurs. Now, that only occurs if there's damage done to the muscle fibers, right? I mean, think about it. How does anything come back stronger if there isn't any damage? So isn't that kind of like how vaccines work, right? We create a little bit of damage so the body can come back a little bit stronger. I mean, that's how we come back stronger. That's how our immune system comes back stronger, as long as we don't overload it or get too used to it. There's not a big difference between that and what happens with muscle. So we create damage in the cell. We create metabolic damage by producing a lot of lactic acid when we work out. And also when we work out and we're producing lactic acid, which is a byproduct of anaerobic metabolism, the muscle cell becomes more acidic. So that creates metabolic damage in the cell that's going to make it split and grow within itself. But then there's more importantly, there is mechanical muscle damage. That is where the muscle fiber literally is slightly pulled. And that's creating micro tears within the muscle, and then the muscle fiber has to come back stronger. All right, so that is called a mechanical breakdown within the muscle. So that is all hypertrophy. And if there is enough damage to the cell, and most studies confirm that around a 75% inroad to the muscle is enough to make it stronger. So what that means is, let's say you are using 100 pounds and you do 1 rep max, you work out and you do a set or so, and then if you go to attempt to do more weight and you can only do like 75% of what you were able to do, that's considered a 25% inroad to the muscle. Damage should occur at that point. Now, naturally, that is very hard to measure. That's just been done in studies to try to figure out how much the muscles have to be broken down. But roughly a 25% inroad to the muscle should create enough damage to where if there's enough fuel, the muscle is going to grow. But the bottom line is progressive overload is the way to that. I mean, that's really the best way to guarantee that the muscles are going to grow. I mean, there's a huge debate in the bodybuilding world and now into maybe some of the fitness influencer world. But the ones that, I don't know, perhaps know a little bit more, except they don't know a lot more, but a little bit more than the guys and gals on Instagram showing the exercises. But there are influencers that argue whether high reps versus low reps and the change in hypertrophy and all this kind of stuff. And, those debates are cute and everything, but the bottom line is overload has always been a way to create muscle growth, and that when we are overloading the muscle, hypertrophy occurs and strength occurs. So they know the number one driver to muscular strength is hypertrophy. So they know that. So in other words, the bigger guy in the room, when we're talking muscles, is going to be the stronger guy in the room. So they know the number one driver. Highlight that. Remember that. The number one driver of bigger muscles is stronger muscles. So they go hand in hand. Now, growing up, there used to be kind of like the funny, playful debates in the gym I worked out in. And I worked out in an old school gym in New Smyrna where, there was literally one exercise bike in the corner and I never saw it used. But other than that, there was absolutely no cardio machines in there. There was a couple selectorized machines, and I'm not saying like the old school equipment's better. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying everybody in there had a pretty serious goal to get bigger or stronger. It wasn't the type of classy place that you're going to see people in there trying to burn body fat like you do today. Like, there was no cardio. It was all old-fashioned strength and pretty much old-fashioned people, young, but with the mindset of I want to get bigger or stronger. And you kind of had the place mixed between powerlifter style and bodybuilding style. And there used to be a playful argument of who's better. And what's funny is even the more educated people who weren't really educated yet, but at least did their research or read enough decent books on physiology, even used to say, which surprises me when I look back, because again, it's not like they're physiologists, but they'd say, there's not a huge difference between bodybuilders and powerlifters. The only difference is the bodybuilders have better genetics and the powerlifters are just big and strong, but they got some body fat on them. And there's no question if you have more girth on you, you're going to be stronger. I mean, right? I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, right? I mean, you can look at somebody like on an airplane, and if they're like a big old person, you're going to be like, okay, that person's going to be harder to move if I have to get down the aisle. I mean, that's just all there is to it. So regardless of where the girth comes from, that person is going to be stronger. So powerlifters had a lot of size, they were big, but they had body fat. And they didn't have body fat because they trained different. That's what people need to understand. They didn't train that different. And any difference that they trained was simply because they wanted to. But the difference between the bodybuilders and the powerlifters was the fact that one was genetics. Can't discount that. When people have a propensity to have a physique more of the style of a bodybuilder, they have a mesomorphic physique. They have more fast twitch muscle fiber. They tend to have medium bone size, which accounts for the mesomorphic physique. They tend to have a little bit better symmetry. These are all parts of genetics, where a powerlifter tends to be more endomorphic, so they tend to store more body fat. They have larger bones. So it's not in how you train, it's how you were born. And in both cases, you can be physically fit and be working at a great physical activity, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm talking about is how do we grow muscle? So both cases, and I'm just using these two examples because they're elite examples of building muscle. It's the only reason. Please understand that. I'm not trying to relive the glory days, okay? It's just they're the elite levels of growing muscle. So they both grow it the same way, lifting heavier loads and overloading. And when I say heavier, that means always focus on overloading, using more weight when you can, in a moderate rep zone. Now, can you do lower reps? Of course. Can you do higher reps? Of course. But you have to understand that there's nothing magic about the reps. I mean, when we use heavier loads, we are going to get stronger. We're going to get bigger. At the same time, if we go too heavy, now we're risking injury because maybe we don't have a spotter, maybe our form isn't as good. But it's not because it's bad. It's just, it can be. Not always. I mean, you can lift very heavy loads for low reps and not risk injury if you're smart about it. But it can be riskier. But oftentimes, people pick a more moderate rep zone of say 6 to 12, somewhere in there. And if you're overloading, you're going to get bigger and stronger. So that is really the key. If the weights are going up, your muscle mass is going up. Okay, just please understand that. Now, the part that gets difficult for people, that's the easy part. Just gain muscle indiscriminately, right? Going back to the guy who just wants to gain a ton of weight, not care if he gains body fat. That's easier. Lift weights, lift heavy weights, and eat as much as you humanly possibly can. Now, nutrient-dense foods is good, of course, because you're going to fuel the muscles with the proper nutrients it needs. But again, in the case of like these big bodybuilders trying to put on weight, they just wanted the calories. And I think everybody needs to understand that too, that there's nothing overly magical about macronutrients, about protein from carbs from fat. They simply needed more calories. If you don't have more calories than you need, if you don't have a caloric surplus, you can't gain muscle. And that is so hard for people that are conscious about losing body fat to understand. It is so hard for them to understand. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think maybe they understand it, but it's fear for them because they want to lose some body fat. And they're like, man, oh man, so if I eat more though, I'm going to gain weight. Yes, you are. Like that's the only way you can gain muscle mass is to gain weight. Isn't that what it is? You're gaining muscle. And the more nutrient dense you eat, the better the odds are of it being muscle versus fat, just because you're not eating wasted or empty calories. All right. So it's hard for people. But the people in the old days that just wanted to gain weight, they didn't care. So it was easy. They might gain a ton of weight. Now, the weight gain they probably gained was 50% fat, 50% muscle. That's not ideal, right? That's putting on a lot of fat. And so let's say they gained 80 pounds, like I said, and you're thinking, no way. Oh, yes way. There are professional bodybuilders that easily packed on that amount of weight in 8 months. I mean, oftentimes you'd see it. So, that means they gained 40 pounds of fat. That's a lot of fat to then turn around and have to lose for a competition. But they would, because they could. I mean, they just would abuse themselves and totally get on a very negative isocaloric diet and lose a ton of weight in a short period of time. And, is that healthy? Of course not, but they would do it. And by the way, another problem with gaining an indiscriminate amount of fat is, unlike muscle, fat cells do go through hyperplasia. So that means fat cells multiply. And guess what? When fat cells multiply, they never go away. So when we gain a lot of fat in a short period of time, we are setting ourselves up to have a harder time losing the fat because now we have more fat cells. Don't we wish muscle cells worked that way? Yes, but unfortunately, it's just not that way. So that's not the ideal way to do it. Even now, I shouldn't say even now. Now, professional bodybuilders understand that, and they don't put on that kind of weight in a short period of time. Now, they might gain, depending on their body mass size, but, 10% mass, instead of like adding 25% mass. They'll gain some weight and risk putting on a little bit of body fat, but they don't do it like they used to. Thank goodness. They've gotten a little bit smarter. But getting back to the question, the problem, the hard part. What about you when you want to gain muscle and lose fat? Okay, is it possible? Yes. But you know what? It is really, really hard because the gaining the muscle part, okay. Lift weights, eat. But here's the deal. If you want to lose body fat, like you're going to have to sacrifice something. Like you can't have everything. You can't gain muscle, lose fat, which is going to be hard enough, possible, hard enough, and like be at a high level of cardiorespiratory fitness too. Something's going to give, all right? So now let me explain that part because that's the missing link right there. Now, when people spend a ton of time, and I know that sounds so vague. What's a ton of time? When they do a lot of higher intensity cardio, let's say they're a runner, like an endurance runner who trains for events, or a triathlete, or a cyclist that races, or a swimmer that competes. That's a lot of intense cardio. It is very hard to gain muscle when you're doing that. It's extremely hard. Have you ever seen a Tour de France rider before and after the tour? I mean, it's only 21 days, but it's 21 days of hell. And those guys go into it lean and come out of it emaciated. I mean, it is very hard to have the energy to gain muscle when you're doing a lot of cardio. It is almost impossible because you need a caloric surplus to gain muscle. That caloric surplus is actually being burned up on the cardio. So when you're trying to gain muscle mass and lose body fat, can it be done? Yes, but we do have to go back to some of the old bodybuilders that kind of got this years ago, and it has gotten like all discombobulated over the last decade because, you know, people who don't know anything but like pretend that they do. You know, I shouldn't say it that way. Maybe they do care and maybe they know something, but they're a little bit too anxious when they see certain studies come out to try to like give their take on it. And that's happened a lot in the world of exercise physiology. So people that don't have the scientific foundation will hear about some things and then come out and give recommendations. So that's happened, and I can't help but chuckle a little bit because I'm thinking, you know, I guarantee you this has been pushed forward by one of those bodybuilder guys that hates cardio, and he hates boring cardio, so he's trying to find a more fun way to do it. I mean, I would not be surprised if I track this back, I could see that that's actually where some of this stuff came from. Not that it's 100% wrong, but it's definitely a little misguided. But over the last decade or so, there's been bodybuilders, and then that turned into, you know, men's health magazines and things like that, where they're telling guys how to gain weight, gain muscle, and get shredded at the same time. So then it comes down to them. So they'd say, oh, just do really high intensity intervals, but don't do very much of it. And so then you get guys doing that instead of doing the old traditional low intensity cardio to burn fat. And that's okay, but man, you have to be really careful because a person who's gaining a lot of muscle typically is a type A personality anyway. There's somebody that likes to go. I mean, I know I'm generalizing, but it tends to be pretty true, and especially like with athletes. So where are they going to moderate it if you say that? I mean, then their intervals are going to become too intense and too long, and they're going to end up cutting into their muscle mass supply and not burning the fat. So it's like, that's not really ideal. Can it be done? Yes. Like if somebody hates the fact, and I know I'm getting ahead here because I'm going to, because I got to spend more time in explaining how to do it. So I know I'm getting ahead, so just bear with me. But like if you're going to do the high intensity interval thing, like some people like to do because they can't stand the long, slow distance, steady rate cardio, you're going to have to keep it really brief. But then you're going to have to ask yourself if you're creating enough of a caloric deficit in that to burn fat. So I don't know that that's ideal, although I suppose it's possible. But what I do know is for years and years and years, bodybuilders were able to, and physique, when we say bodybuilders, I don't just mean men. I mean men and women, in the sport of physique competition. For years, when they went to compete in a show, at the very least, they wanted to maintain their amount of body mass. I mean, they don't want their muscles to go away that they trained for, but they knew they had to drop some fat. So they did long, slow distance cardio, meaning low intensity cardio, so they can burn fat and not cut into the muscle supply. And the reason why that works is very simple. At lower intensities, we're burning predominantly fat for fuel. I mean, that's just a fact. Like, this isn't like just made up. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, they can put numbers to it. Like if you're, say, around 60% of your maximum heart rate or lower, you're burning over 70% of the calories from fat. So you're not cutting into those carbohydrates. And the longer you go, the greater percentage of that caloric output is fat. So they would just do long walks, these bodybuilders, to burn fat and not cut into the muscles. Because what happens is when you do higher intensity cardio is gluconeogenesis can occur. Because at higher intensity cardio, what ends up happening is all of the calories being burned is coming from carbohydrates. So anything over around 80 to 85% of your maximum heart rate, you have gone anaerobic. And anaerobic, there is no fat being used for fuel. It is 100% carbs. So if you're lower on carbs because you've been dieting, which of course is the third link, you can't like lose fat unless you've now had some form of a caloric deficit. So you're lower on carbs. And if you run out, then your body starts eating its own muscle tissue to produce more carbohydrates, and that's called gluconeogenesis. You are literally creating new glucose from your body. That's what gluconeogenesis is. So the triathletes and the runners that lift weights, great, trying to maintain some strength. Probably not happening a lot if they're not eating enough and if they're doing too much cardio. But then they're doing a lot of cardio, they're actually wasting away their muscle tissue. All right. So for the person that wants to try to gain as much muscle as possible, I salute you. Amen. That should be all of our goals. And though that they want to lose some body fat too, you need to stick to low intensity cardio. You have to give up something. So what are you giving up? Well, some people want to be aerobically fit, right? You can do that with low intensity. You're just going to have to go longer, but it can happen. But you're not going to like be winning 5Ks. I mean, unless you're just naturally gifted, which, I mean, in reality, who cares? But I mean, some people do. They're like, no, I want to be the most, I want to be the most fit person around and everything. That's fine. Like that is 100% fine. But it's when people say, well, I want to gain as much muscle and I want to lose as much fat and I want to be this. It's like, okay, so what are you going to give up? And probably if you do all three, what you're giving up is gaining as much muscle mass as possible. That's probably what you're going to give up. If you're okay with that, fine. And yeah, there's time to put it on later. I mean, I'm not like saying there isn't. I mean, I would assume there is, right? I mean, meaning if that's your goal. But you are going to have to give up something. But the key to reaching this goal, which seems to be on most people's mind, is you got to lift weights. You got to create overload. You have to. You have to create muscle damage. It's not going to be, you can maintain muscle mass by just going to the gym and checking your boxes, maybe. But if you want to get bigger, you do have to like pay attention to your loads and use heavier loads when you can in good form. I mean, it's really that simple. And a quick caveat to that, because I was talking to a client about that. Like, some people don't know how much load to use. Well, it's like the best method is trial and error. Like when you pick a good moderate rep range, or you pick a rep range that works for you, because I have to stress, there's nothing magic about rep numbers. Like, higher reps doesn't lead to more definition. God, that one drives me crazy. Lower reps don't bulk you up. I mean, no, that's not it. There's a rep continuum which shows that basically almost all of them are the same. And if you do lower reps, you have to use heavier loads. If you do higher reps, you have to use lighter loads because your body can't do it unless that's the case. So you pick a load that really works good for you. Like at the gym, we use 8 to 15 often. It's a great range. But I mean, for myself, sometimes I'll go lower because I like to. But whatever load, whatever RM you're doing, rep max you're doing, you want to pick the heaviest weight you can use for that. So let's say I write you a workout. This is 4 sets of 8 on an exercise. So that means with your 8 reps, you're using as much weight as you can in good form. Plain and simple. It's so simple. And that's trial and error. So you do a set, you go, I think I can go up a little. Yep, okay, that's a sweet spot right there. I barely got 8. That's the load you want to use. We don't necessarily have to go beyond that because sometimes that causes more muscle damage than we need. So the rep max is the appropriate load. But getting back to our formula, that's the formula. And we have to make sure that we're not doing too much. We can't overtrain. There's a method to the madness. We know how much volume is good within reason, meaning there are ranges like 1 to 5 sets and 1 to 3 exercises per muscle group. Like, we have to pay attention to not do too much. I mean, typically if your strength workout is taking longer than 30 or 40 minutes, you're probably doing too much or you're moving too slow. So, we don't grow by doing more. We grow by using more loads and pushing ourselves harder. And harder is relative for everybody. I mean, I've had older men, older women, when I say older, I'm talking in their 80s, that can outwork somebody in their 30s. Are they using as much weight? Oftentimes, no, but they're outworking them. So, like, we got to work harder. That's relative, like working harder for what you can do, not what somebody else can do. It's not what somebody else can do. It's what you can do. That needs to be the focus in the gym. And then with cardio, if your goal is to gain as much muscle and burn fat, you've got to do low intensity cardio. You can't do running sprints. You can't be training for 5Ks. You can't be training for triathlon. You can't be training for bike races. You're going to have to keep it to walking, easy cycling, whatever. But whatever keeps your heart rate around 60% of your maximum. That's it. That's low. That's very low, right? Like for me, what is that? That's like 105 beats per minute. That's low. That's walking, right? That's walking or easy cycling. That's fine. I mean, I got no problem with it. I enjoy both. But I know that, my goal now is to maintain strength. So I don't kill myself in high intensity cardio often. I really keep a check on it. And when I do, by the way, I eat a heck of a lot more. But I'm really not trying to lose body fat. So I'm not overly worried about that because I know I can compensate by eating more. But see, that's the problem. When somebody's trying to lose body fat, then they can't compensate from that hard cardio by eating more, right? So like I said, you have to give something up. And then you have to eat nutrient-dense foods. And nutrient-dense foods are foods that are lean in protein, lean proteins, low in fat. That's key. Eating a lot of dietary fat doesn't do anything for us. High in fiber, low in sugar. Like, those are nutrient-dense foods. And people, again, are fearful because of what, influencers in the media have told you. Oh, don't eat carbohydrates. And so then you're not like eating any whole grain breads. You're not eating any whole wheat pastas or rices. And it's like, okay, you're not going to grow then because your muscles actually grow from eating the carbohydrates because the carbohydrates are stored in your muscles as glycogen. So what the hell do you think you're going to grow from? I mean, again, I get a little frustrated because it's like, all the crap out there that's flat out not true. The low carb people, they're going to make you fat. It's like, hey, have you ever studied the Krebs cycle? So the Krebs cycle states that fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. Can I repeat that for you? Fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. So what if there's no carbohydrate? Oh, there's no flame. So you're burning fat. I mean, it's not based in science. I mean, they're just hacks. And it's frustrating because, and no, we haven't changed our opinion on that, by the way. Influencers have, marketers have, because you people are so fickle that you're going to go with whatever trend that comes around. And so they know that. So they, do it to you all the time. Blame yourselves. I mean, quit buying the products. But the bottom line is, true nutritionists and scientists and people that have studied physiology and kinesiology and physicians, and they know. I mean, there's nothing new. Nutritional science has not changed. We have not gone from low fat to low carb. No, marketers have. This isn't new information. You cannot gain muscle and lose fat without carbohydrates. Naturally, if you eat too much, you're going to get fat. But that's not just carbs. That's everything. I mean, that's just eating more calories than you need. So you need to eat nutrient-dense foods. Notice I didn't say high protein, because all that's crap. You need to eat nutrient-dense foods. So that is leaner proteins, complex carbohydrates. But the real key is low in fat, high in fiber, low in sugar. That's nutrient-dense foods. Examples: rye bread, sourdough bread, fruits, vegetables, rice, quinoa, potatoes, legumes. Like, it's those foods you want to be eating. And you need to eat enough of them to grow muscle. And if you're not eating a lot of crap, you're probably not putting on the fat. Okay? So I know this was longer because this was an important topic. And I need you to listen. All right? Now, speaking of that, young man Zach, one of the owners of Overhead Door, has gone through his own little transformation. He was a phenomenal athlete in high school, played baseball, played football. Then he got into college and did what many kids did. He put on a lot of weight, and he just was not happy about it. So he started losing weight, and then a few years ago, after he'd lost some already, he came to me for some testing, and then we started training him, and he's gained a ton of muscle. He's a muscular kid anyway, and now he's dropped a ton of body fat. But I'm just so proud of him. But that's just my lead-in to talk about what a great company Overhead Door is. They're the flat-out best garage door company in Daytona Beach, really in the state of Florida. And Jeff and Zach Hawk are the owners, and they're friends, and they're just great for our area. So if you need any help, please give them a shout at overheaddordaytona.com. Until next time, be Max Fit and be Max Well.